Hello, my name is Christopher Dring.
And I'm James Batchelor.
And welcome to the first ever MCV and Develop podcast. We're at the Game Developer Conference in San Francisco and we've seen lots of cool things and now we're going to talk about them. But before we get to that, the headline. PlayStation has announced that its VR headset will arrive in October for £350/$400. There will be 50 games released by the end of the year with around 330 developers working on PlayStation VR products.
Epic Games has launched an Unreal virtual reality editor for game developers, beating rival Unity to the punch. Unity's editor is still in the prototype stage with no release date in sight.
Crytek has launched the 5th version of its powerful CryEngine technology and it's letting developers pay what they want to use it.
Xbox is pushing cross-platform play between Xbox One and PC. They've also expressed a desire to allow for cross-platform gameplay between Xbox One and PS4, a move not entirely ruled out by Sony.
And in a surprise piece of news, Jagex is deep in conversation with a Chinese mining company, and by mining we mean iron ore, that wants to buy the RuneScape maker. Shandong Honda is reportedly willing to splash $300 million on the UK independent publisher and developer.
Those are the headlines, and joining us this week at GDC to discuss developments is Dr. Dave Ranyard. Dave worked at PlayStation for over 17 years on projects such as SingStar and Wonderbook, and most recently was studio head at Sony London as it worked on a number of virtual reality games. As a VR pioneer, he has set up his own VR indie studio to work on new hardware. David, welcome to the show.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us, taking out of what's a very, very busy week. I mean, how have you found the show so far?
It's been a very exciting show. I do work with the Game Developers Conference. I'm on their advisory board, so I've been here a lot. And some years are a bit like that middle ground. Everyone's in crunch. There's no new tech on the horizon. Whereas this is like the opposite of that. It's like super optimistic. It's all about VR to a point of embarrassment and annoyance in a sense.
Massively. But you go around the expo floor this week, and pretty much every every stand has an Oculus or a Vive or whatever, and it's going to extremes. OptiTrack, Chris, a motion capture company, has a virtual reality motion captured basketball game going on. So you put on a virtual reality headset and you play basketball against someone in a motion capture suit, and it's impressive, but is it needed? I don't know.
Yeah, so it feels, in all honesty, slightly overheated. I mean, I'm a super into VR, so I'm very excited about it. But everybody's like chasing it at the moment, and I think that might have a little bit of anticlimax for some people who perhaps don't, they perhaps haven't got quite as much skill as is needed at the moment, and it doesn't necessarily work for them. But nevertheless, this year it's super exciting to see everybody talking about it and so on.
I mean, this is the thing. I spoke to Jim Ryan yesterday, who's the European boss at PlayStation. I asked him, how do you think it's going to do? And he shrugged his shoulders. And this is not the first time I've encountered it. Nobody seems to really know how well it's going to do. I mean, you've just taken a bit of a gamble in some ways, Dave, by sort of making your own studio dedicated to this sort of stuff. But you must have some idea if it's going to explode or crawl out of the gates.
So my view is, I think there's a lot of anticipation, clearly, and a lot of demand for that anticipation. I think it will come out. It will be exciting. There are some amazing experiences that I think we both experienced this week.
Some impressive stuff this week.
So clearly it's a big step change in the kind of experience you can have. But in terms of the business side and how it's going to play out, my personal view is there'll be a bit of a hurrah and a boom when things come out, and particularly towards the end of the year. I think the PlayStation one will do very well because the price is good and it's very entertainment focused. I think this time next year might be a little bit of an anticlimax, but actually after that, I think it will build slow and steady. I do see that VR will impact our lives in a number of different ways. Entertainment and gaming will push forward, as it kind of has done in other spaces, but what you can do with it in health, what you can do with it in education, what you can do with it in business to business communication are incredibly valuable and productive things. So as people learn more about it and the costs go down and so on, I actually think it will impact our lives. It won't replace things, but it will be an additive positive impact on people's lives. But I think it will take a little bit of time to get there.
So you think PlayStation's price is good?
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, it's cheaper than the others, and I think the overall package of getting the PlayStation VR, whatever, £350. I mean, I don't know what the headline price of a console is, but you know, you can get a VR setup all in for probably £600. I'm saying.
I was quite happy to see that because I currently an Xbox One owner. I don't have a PC, so like the idea of £600 console headset rather than building a PC, which is something you're currently trying to face, Chris.
Yes, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, so I actually think it's a good price and the experience is good. You know, I mean, I've worked a lot on the PlayStation. I mean, I love all VR, and I think it's broadly in the two camps. You know, you've got the high end desktop or tethered to a machine VR, which is the PlayStation, Oculus, and Vive, and then you've got the mobile VR, which is actually very powerful in different ways. I mean, so the interesting thing I think is I actually think most people's first experience will be on mobile VR because you can do it in a coffee shop, and I think I think there's a great opportunity for social experiences around that in VR. So fairly short form. Here, have a go at this. What do you think? And people enjoying that. But obviously, it doesn't have some of the fidelity and the control you get with the other systems. But that might come on mobile. I mean, those guys. I mean, everybody's involved there. You've got Google excited. You've got Samsung who've already released the Gear VR. I've been talking to some people from China who say they see a huge wave of this in China, which is a big market coming. So I do think that it is a business, that it's not going to go away. I think there will be a little bit of a peak and a trough, but then it will be slow and steady build, a bit like the internet was actually.
It's hard not to get caught up in the hype. Given, as you say, Dave, there's so many big tech companies are behind it with with their hardware and their platforms. But even the engine providers. I went to all three of the big engine briefings, like Unreal, Unity, and CryEngine. There was a lot of talk about VR. We are optimized for VR. We are perfect for developing VR. Hell, the fact that Unity and Unreal are both finding ways for developers to develop games within VR. It's just kind of the tools are there from the ground up. Like for any developer to say, right now you can start making VR games. I think that alone is a kind of a show of faith of how much adoption they expect of it. Certainly from developers, if not from end users.
I think it's interesting for developers as well because there's a couple of things that are happening which actually help them to develop for VR, which aren't the technical side so much. So one is when you do VR. You don't need to make a huge amount of art assets. You can make a great experience in one room or two rooms or whatever, which is quite different. And as an indie, that's quite attractive. I think you can be more about the story or the atmosphere or the core mechanic, and less about making AAA massive landscapes. I think that's really important. And that obviously with digital delivery, you sort of I'm pretty sure everyone with a VR headset, you can assume, could buy stuff digitally.
Yes, you'd hope so.
You sort of think that. So those two things together, actually, if you're an indie dev, make it quite an attractive proposition because you can make something. Navigation is not a requirement of every game. So I see why, from a dev perspective, they're actually pretty keen. And also, I mean, maybe not so much now because so many people are switching to it, but it's certainly in the last sort of 18 months, it's been quite. It's been an opportunity to stand out from the rest as well in terms of being able to make something, get it out there, and so on.
How much risk is there for the developers though? Because I often feel like the amount of stories I write up for developer that about a new studio forming and being entirely dedicated to it, VR. Like you said, you've got plenty of experience under your belt, but then you have a number of kind of indies who come out of nowhere or people who are used to kind of console or mobile development now going fully into VR, and yet. Let's face it, the audience for VR isn't going to be built for years yet because at first it's going to be early adopters. I know we've got Oculus and Vive are due this year. Samsung's out now. PlayStation VR is going to be out in October. It's still going to be the early adopters that are going to be the tech savvy, massively into the latest thing. There's not going to be a massive audience for VR, and yet so many people are putting their eggs in that basket.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think unfortunately, some people are perhaps. Not spending their time as wisely as they could because there are certain things that you learn when you're working in VR, like navigation's not required. I mean, navigation's cool, and you play Bullet Train,
yes,
and they just have like a transport mechanism,
it's just
and it
works.
works.
Warp mechanism, and it works. You don't even have to think about moving, and you remove the motion sickness because you're just standing on the spot. Therefore, it's a great way to kind of remove what's the one of the biggest worries about VR.
Yeah. So I mean, those things are getting solved pretty quickly. But the fact that you don't need to, you can make an experience that's perhaps more story led. And one of the other things that's interesting in VR is it doesn't have to be as interactive as games, because actually being there is. Sounds weird, but you can be broader. You can be like, oh, this is an experience. It's not a game with a high score or whatever. You can be a bit broader. And so from that perspective, I think it can not necessarily easier, but again, it can make the makeup for an indie like more interesting as to what they're doing. I think you're right. There'll be some winners and losers in there, but I think there will be a market. I mean, the mobile, the estimates I've seen are around 4 times as many mobile headsets as the console and PC ones. So you could be looking at 10 million headsets out there by the end of the year, and then that could grow exponentially next year. So it's not like there's no market, and there's a lot of people very excited. One of the it's a balancing act, isn't it? It's like if there isn't enough titles, people won't buy the headsets. But then the worry is, there might be too many titles, so that not all those studios will make money. So it's like the same time, the more people that are making stuff, that might actually drive more headset sales because there's more content there.
That's one of the things that I found most reassuring actually about this week, is that last year when we were talking about VR, Ubisoft announced it was going to make VR games. They were the only major third-party publisher making VR games. I spoke to EA and they were like, yeah, it's interesting, we've got headsets, but we're going to wait a little bit. Take-Two, they're the ones repeatedly saying to me that we're not the first. We don't jump in first. We go in second. And although you got big names like Facebook and Sony and all these people pushing it, you didn't have the big manufacturers. But then at PlayStation's conference, EA announced a Star Wars experience. 2K Games is on that list of developers, and Warner Brothers is as well. And you look at that and you think, oh, okay, so the big guys are now coming on board. Do you think that's important?
Oh yeah, definitely, because that just gives credence to what's happening. I actually think that some of the big, like you say, there's a Star Wars experience. I don't know exactly what Warner's are going to do, but I wonder if the first toe in the water will be these shorter form experiences that might be 20, 30 minutes long, and that they'll, it might still be a while for those guys to bring out their quotes full length game, end quotes, and we still don't know what the full length game actually is. Is it a 40-hour story, or is it 2 or 3 hours of story and then more mission-based stuff? We really don't know the answers to that, and I think it will settle in a different place to disc-based games or traditional games. But yeah, it is very reassuring that the bigger publishers are getting in there, and I've left Sony, but I'm still very good friends with them, and they're I think actually quite happy that they've got those conversations going. They seem quite confident about where PSVR is going.
And what about, you talked about digital distribution there of VR games, and that seems to be the big thing. But one of the issues might be in getting this into people's hands, because you have to experience VR to. I mean, we're all excited about VR because we've all played on them and used them loads. Getting it out there, putting it into people's, you're going to need. Well, events will do it, but also the high street, I should think physical shops is where you go in, and Dixon's and Game and all that kind of stuff. You put on these headsets and you play it that way. But at the same time, you have to wonder if perhaps they'll be that keen to jump on it. If once they've sold the headsets, everyone will just be downloading the games via PSN or Steam or whatnot.
What, from the retailer's perspective?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, that sort of big publisher retail relationship is not something I'm as close to. But what I remember about that is we actually did similar stuff with SingStar. So I worked on that back in the day, and everybody, before 2004, the idea of singing at your TV screen seemed somewhat crazy. But by doing sampling exactly that, doing the shopping malls and all those things, people tried SingStar, and that had barriers, like psychological barriers, in a similar way to VR has actually. That the embarrassment of, why am I going to go and sing in front of my friends? That seems mortifyingly embarrassing. And yet, once people did it, they really enjoyed it. So I think that sampling thing is actually quite well established in terms of creating new markets in gaming. I understand what you're saying about the retailers, but their opportunities to sell quite an expensive headset, and people will probably buy some software to go with it while they're there, and there's all kinds of soft bundles that they can do. So I think they're probably going to go for it, aren't they?
I wonder if there's an opportunity here with VR for the arcades. For people who can't afford a full PC rig but want to experience it. You go down to your local arcade, pay $5, stick on the headset, play 5 minutes of a game. I mean, certainly, the demos I've been playing this week. Things like Bullet Train, things like Stingray had a tech demo. Things like like Oculus's VR Sports. You can absolutely they feel very arcadey. They feel like a insert coin to play again. And I wonder if there's an opportunity there for like arcades or like in the bowling alleys with all their machines. Like you only need like one person to kind of man it and reset it as and when it's broken. But yeah,
I think that's a good call. And I've talked to a couple of people who've talked about doing that or doing tours. So like I guess like pop-up arcades basically. And I could see that happening in the next year or two. To get that sampling out there. And I think people will pay, to be honest, because you're reading about it and you do have to experience it. And you're right, it's a high barrier to entry, the price of some of the stuff. But to go and do that, yes, you're going to spend 10, 20 quid. That's not that expensive these days for a night out, is it?
Even the demos now, like I said, like the ones at Bullet Train alone, it's worth like a tenner to like just go and play 15 minutes, like for the experience you get and the fact that it can kind of help you kind of make your mind up about VR. It's definitely something I could. If they brought Bullet Train out in my town, I'd be down there all the time.
Yeah. But also, I would look at the mobile VR is the other place because actually as people buy handsets, they buy them in a different way, don't they? Typically you're buying them on a monthly contract. So you can see that. I bought the Gear VR with the free headset. Just because it's like phone upgrade. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And obviously I'm into VR, but even if I wasn't, I probably would have done that, and I would be trying it, and I would be like going into the coffee shop and showing friends, and I think that a lot of people will get an experience from that. And funnily enough, like Google Cardboard has been an interesting sort of Google experiment, and if you work on the high end stuff, you sort of look at it and think, is that helping us? But actually, for the non-initiated, that's really cool as well. Even though it's very simple Google Cardboard, people do kind of go, oh wow, look, I didn't realise that's what it was. So I think even that is actually bringing people in. So I do, with all this kind of fanfare, I do actually think a lot of the mainstream will want to try it. It's getting out into the news. It's going to be very, mainstream from a media perspective this year, and I think that will drive quite a lot of people to try it. Like if there is a pop-up arcade or something like that, they'll go along and do it.
One of the things that I've been paying attention to GDC, and I think perhaps even more exciting than VR actually, is the almost the accessibility now of all the engines out there.
Yeah.
Crytek's free to. I'd be interested to see how that does. Pay what they want sort of model, and nobody really charges anything up front for these anymore. People only have to give half these engines money if they're successful. They also seem to be easier to use. I was talking yesterday to Platonic, and they were showing me stuff that they've sort of turned around in hours almost. In terms of what used to take them months. Now, I'm not a developer, I'm not an expert in this sort of stuff, but that must be quite exciting from a developer's perspective.
Yeah, it's a democratisation, isn't it? And we've seen technology do that in so many fields over the years. Even going from the typewriter to Word, right? Suddenly, I remember when the Mac 2s came out. Oh wow, word processing. This thing's it's amazing, and and it is great. It's a democratisation. I think you do have to stand back and think. Everyone has probably got a good book in them, but not 10 good books, right? So there's also that element. But for me personally, like I've got children who I hope that at least one of them will go into the games industry. I think it's great that that's there, and you could be in school and actually making a 3D game. Do you know what I mean? At the moment there's some great tools out there, for example, for kids to learn like Scratch and so on, but they're quite retro in terms of what you can achieve. But I think, as you say, with these engines, actually they could get pretty skilled even before they're going to college and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good. And it also, for developers, it's actually a great opportunity to understand how the other half live. So I'm a coder by background. I'm terrible at art, but with the tools, actually, you can kind of get a much better feel for the whole pipeline of making games by using these. I guess it's a downside. You don't necessarily get the depth, so you don't necessarily understand how to get the graphics to sing on a console or something like that. But I think it's much easier to get that overview by using the tools that are available. And as you say, they're free now.
And as you say, Chris, like they're just so they've become quite intuitive. I was able to playtest the Unreal Virtual Reality editor, having never used Unreal Editor or any editor before. I think the last time I tried game development was BBC Basics. So, but it is just so simple. I know that it was already set up when I went in, but it was so simple to just place an object, scale it, rotate it, add a light, click on whether or not you wanted the shadows to be cast, duplicate things, set up a scene. Within 5-10 minutes, I'd kind of very much kind of customized it myself, and it means that anyone with a lack of experience, because obviously like coding, it's a very intensive discipline. You have to have a very firm understanding of maths and science, which I don't. And yet that's no longer a barrier. Like you don't have to be that academic to be able to build a game, because ultimately all you need to be is creative.
Yeah, and which is great. The only comment I'd make about this, so I've been into my kids' school and done a talk, and I'm going to their cousin's school in a month to do a talk. And the one thing I always say in those is, who likes maths? And like about 4 hands go up out of 60. And I say, well, if you like video games, it's really great to be good at maths. And I always think, games has always been a great driver for kids because to pick up maths. Because, there's like gender bias in maths and things like that in schools. And I always like to push it. But actually, I think tools like this probably help even out some of the gender bias in education, and we'll get more equal split of gender into the industry, which is something that we're all really keen on.
But the benefit of these engines as well being so easy to use and free is that, particularly go back to the VR stuff, everyone talks about VR going into different industries. So you talk about the ability, there's a new near where I live, a new estate is being built, and you can buy the houses now, and they're not actually built yet. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if they had a VR headset so you could see what the house looked like? But of course, you'd need someone to program and design that. And the easier that this gets, maybe we're not that far away from getting to the stage where pretty much anyone can quickly create something in virtual reality using this technology. I mean, that's...
No, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, to be honest, you can imagine going around IKEA or not going around IKEA and being able to, actually pick all the furniture and put it in your room.
Work out whether it fits.
Yeah, work out whether it fits. See, actually, I don't know do I want that many Billy bookcases, or whatever. But I think you're absolutely right. And, people can probably write a custom layer on top. So a business like you, the builders near you or the architects could write a simple custom layer on top of one of the tools so that Joe Punter could go in, see the house and put some furniture in it and take a walk through it and so on. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's where I do think it will impact our lives. I mean, people talk about it having an impact like the internet's had. So, and I don't know if that's exactly right, but nevertheless, you can sort of see that, like buying something, retail, I think would be a big deal. Education would be a big deal. Health would be a big deal. And communication. So instead of using, video conference stuff, where video conferencing is great, but people are always looking like somewhere behind you. Yeah. And it feels slightly disconnected. But when I've been in VR spaces where you genuinely feel like you're with the person, that they've got lip movement, their eyes are looking at you, they've got hand gestures as well. So I think that all those areas, it will start to impact us.
That sounds like a good future way to record this podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other great thing about the fact that so many other industries are getting not only behind VR but also behind the games tools and the engines. I mean, all of the engines have clients outside the games industry. Yeah. The great thing is it's creating a lot of job opportunities for developers, the established developers who maybe aren't as passionate about games anymore. Like they can go and do ArcViz, they can do prototyping for the automotive industries. Yeah. They can do interior design, like stuff like this with the skills that they've already got. So it's a really promising time for developers as well, because their skills are now needed. There's a demand for it.
I think one of the most interesting things like that is actually I know a number of like big name companies who are working in VR or AR, and they're what they're doing is they're using the game studio model to make non-gaming things, productivity. Okay. Yeah. So they sort of say, right, actually we're not going to be like a call center. We're going to be like a game studio. It's going to be fun. There's going to be the pool table and all, and all that sort of stuff. But the target is not necessarily to make a game, but because they're making experiences and it's very user-centric and so on, they're actually using that model and hiring people from the gaming industry. Probably the risk there is that the salaries will go up, so it might be harder for the gaming industry to hire the talent because it might be attractive in other places. However, it's also great for game devs because there's more game opportunities out there.
Before we drift too far away from the games industry, so going back to bring it back to GDC, I mean, kind of aside from the VR stuff, which is dominating the show, I mean, what's the most impressive stuff you've seen or talks that you've heard?
Well, to be honest, I've been in quite a few meetings, but what I really liked was the flash backwards, which was the opening, and it was actually going back 30 years of GDC. So that was very interesting to see those old faces and have a reminder of what the industry was like at different times. So I really enjoyed that. And then it's just very, very buzzy this year.
Yeah, there's definitely an atmosphere, there's a vibe.
Yeah, I can remember. So on the GDC board, after this, I'm going to the GDC board lunch where there's 20 of us and we sit around and we all say what our thoughts of the conference are. And, certainly, I think 3 years ago, I remember everybody there going, oh, everyone's a bit fed up, really. Yeah. It's like everyone's in crunch. And there's no real, I think the consoles weren't out yet, and it was like, I don't know. And this year's the absolute opposite of that. Everyone's buzzing, everyone's doing something. I mean, like you say, take the VR thing aside, everyone seems very excited. I think it's great for indies at the moment, seem really positive. You look like at the awards here, the indies were the sort of independent awards are first and then the choice awards are second, but actually probably half the choice awards went to indies.
Yeah.
Which was great. I mean, on a not personal note, but my favourite game of last year is Her Story, and it did really well in the awards, and I thought that was brilliant. It's the most innovative game I played last year, basically. So it was great to see the recognition for that. So yeah, I think there's a few different things that I've found good this year.
What do you sort of move away from GDC? One of the things that's dominating sort of the online chatter is the idea of Xbox One players playing against PlayStation 4 gamers. Which is a bit of I was on the train earlier and a couple of just, kids were talking about it. It seems to have, that's starting to permeate out there. Do you think that's ever going to happen?
Well, nobody's said no, right? I think it could happen, and I think it should really. It just seems, it's almost, I guess it's useful to the platforms for it not to happen in a sense that if there's a group of kids or 2 or 3 kids have got PlayStations, then the other ones are more likely to get them because they want to play against each other. But to be honest, that's a democratisation for parents, I think, because it's probably frustrating if they've bought into a console and then their child is not able to, play against their friends. So I actually think it's one of those features that should really be there. It seems it's just fair.
Certainly, kind of in an age when, mobile games. I know they're ever so slightly different, but mobile games, I can play a game on my iPhone. I can then log in on Facebook or the browser version, continue my progress, and then I can borrow an Android and play on that. So many games are now cross-device.
Yeah.
The simplicity or seeming it looks like simplicity of just the same game, same code base, just different servers. That's the main technical barriers that they're on different servers and different protections. There's no reason why we can't be playing together.
Yeah, I mean, from a consumer perspective, I think it should really happen because it just seems it's like if you pay for a music streaming service, actually you really want to be able to use that on your PC and on your phone and whatever else. But the main thing for me really is it's about the cultural thing, particularly of kids or teenagers who want to play against their friends, and I actually think it's just better if they can all play together.
Well, Skylanders is famously a game that you can save your data onto one Skylander and take it around a friend's house. Doesn't matter what console they have Skylanders on, you can play on that. But one of the things I think would be great is it would change the console war arguments. No longer will they be arguing over the best exclusives or how many unit sales they've had. They'll be fighting over online kudos. Imagine Titanfall 2, and if EA launch that with a big epic PlayStation versus Xbox worldwide fight with a global leaderboard. It's a marketing thing and it'd be fun. But on the other side of it, obviously, a lot of these games have exclusive DLC on one platform at the moment, and I think that might cause some issues if if you've got the Xbox One version, you've got a special gun. The PS4 version has an extra level, and that's where you might have a.
But then there are ways around that. I was talking to Psyonix earlier this week, and they were saying because obviously the various different versions of Rocket League on PlayStation and Xbox have their own unique exclusive vehicles. They've just had to develop a way so that if you're playing on PlayStation and you're against an Xbox opponent who's got a Warthog, well, the PlayStation version just swaps the Warthog model for something different. It swaps the aesthetic for something different, so you can still play together even with those DLC barriers. So there are ways around it.
I guess it might be harder for games that are already out. It's like, oh god, we're going to have to patch these now. So, so it's probably slightly painful for some devs, but at the same time, I think the general benefit across the gaming community, I feel like it's worth it. But I can say that because I'm indie now.
Okay, well, Dave, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, not a problem. I've enjoyed it, and it's nice at the end of the show to reflect on what's happened and just have a chat about it. So thank you very much.
Definitely. Well, we should be back here next year, and certainly, I hopefully see you at E3 maybe.
Yeah. I'd say I'm 60% sure I'm coming to E3. I've just got to find somebody to pay for me, but I'm sure they will.
Well, I'm 100% sure that Chris is going to be out there, so okay. I'm sure he'll be able to catch up with you again.
Yeah, cool.
I'll definitely be there, yeah.
Okay, in the meantime, you can obviously find all of your games industry news at mcvuk.com and develop-online.net. Thank you very much for joining us.